content and material discussed in these podcasts are for informational purposes only and are not intended to be a substitute for your professional veterinarian's advice, diagnosis, or treatments. Always seek the assistance of your own veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding the medical condition of your pet.
Excuse me, are you in the know? This is a Noman.co production.
Hello, I'm Dr. Gary Clemens, and you're listening to Talking Pets Podcast. Is my dog trying to dominate me? Today, I will discuss how some of these training methods originated and what the true definition of dominance is in our domestic animals. I will also make suggestions of ways we can train our pups to be well-socialized adult family members, and I will make recommendations on how to deal with aggressive dogs. But before I begin today's topic, I want to tell you about a client and his new German Shepherd puppy that came in for its first vaccination probably 20 years ago when I was practicing. The pup was about 8 weeks old. When I entered the exam room, the pup was growling and cowering under the owner's chair. Now, it's not unusual for a pup to be fearful and try to hide, but it was really unusual to have a pup growl so aggressively. After much effort, the owner finally placed the pup on the exam table, where it continued to growl and snap at me whenever I attempted to approach it. I took some tasty treats out of a drawer to try to get the pup to calm down, assuming he was just extremely frightened. He continued trying to bite whenever I got too close to him. Finally, the owner was able to place a muzzle on the puppy, which we never have to do. However, he still would not settle down. I was not able to do a very good physical exam, but I did the best job I could, and then I finally vaccinated him. I told the owner this was very unusual behavior for a pup, and because the owner had 2 small children, I suggested maybe he should return the pup to the breeder. I told him I was concerned this pup could eventually injure one of his kids or one of their friends when it got older. The owner never returned for any follow-up vaccinations, so I assumed he had returned the pup to the breeder. Well, about 8 or 9 months later, my receptionist told me the same owner was on the phone and wanted to speak with me. When I asked him what he wanted to speak to me about, he said his dog had attacked one of his children while they were playing with their toy soldiers. The dog attacked the child's face, and the only reason it stopped attacking was because the other child was brave enough to pull the dog's tail as hard as he could. I think he said the child required about 60 or 70 stitches in his face. I told the owner the dog would have to be quarantined for 10 days before we could euthanize him, or else the head would have to be submitted for rabies analysis if we did it any sooner. Well, the owner said, "I don't want to euthanize him, I want you to castrate him." Needless to say, I was shocked. I told him neutering his dog would not alter his aggression much, and he should decide if he loved his dog more than he loved his children. I never heard from him again, but I did say a silent prayer for his children. With the popularity of animal-related programs, there are several cable channels that feature dog trainers. One of these trainers frequently tells owners the reason they cannot get their dog trained properly is because their dog is trying to dominate them. On one episode, an owner was having trouble training his husky. The dog trainer said he wanted to walk the dog by himself. He placed a choker collar on the husky, and during the walk, the dog was trying to bite at him, so he literally strung the dog up with his rear legs almost off the ground. You can imagine how terrified the dog was, and he was still trying to bite at the trainer's hand so he would stop choking him. After being choked for what seemed like quite a long time, the husky passed out on the ground. The trainer knelt down, placed his hand on the dog's chest, and said, "He was trying to dominate me, and now he's finally submitting to me." Nothing could have been further from the truth. The dog was close to dying from being choked by the trainer. This video was actually shown at an animal behavior conference I attended. The speaker was Dr. Sophia Yin, who is a board-certified veterinary animal behaviorist. She was demonstrating how barbaric this type of training was and how dominance is rarely the problem with dogs. 20 to 30 years ago, social dominance theory and ideas about how wolves behaved in the wild were the primary models that guided how dogs were being trained. Unfortunately, the wolves in the study were groups of unrelated wolves that were forced to live together in close proximity, which created an abnormal grouping of wolves. The interaction between these unrelated families of wolves is much different than how related families of wolves would react to each other. True dominance in related families of wolves is described as how two individuals use force, aggression, and submission to determine who has priority access to resources such as food, resting areas, or a mate. In a related wolf pack, the highest rank or alpha male and the highest ranked female are the only pair that mate and have pups. The entire pack then helps feed and raise the pups. The alpha male and female keep the other pack members from mating. Dominance is established by force, aggression, and submission. True dominant and submissive relationships exist only when one individual consistently submits to the other. Once established, this relationship is reinforced through warning postures from the alpha wolf, such as the tail raised over the back, hackles raised over the shoulders, standing erect on the toes, growls, and lips curled, baring the teeth. Submissive behavior, on the other hand, includes lowering the head and looking away, licking the lips, ears back, squatting to urinate, rolling over to expose the abdomen, and turning the head to the side where they form almost a T with the alpha dog. This type of signaling between dominant and submissive wolves averts most full-blown fighting in a related wolf pack. Now, contrary to popular belief, many dog owners still believe that the submissive animal rolls over on its back willingly and is not flipped over by the dominant animal. This thinking is totally untrue. The most stable relationships are those in which submissive animals automatically defer to the dominant individual in the absence of any threatening posturing or displays by the dominant animal. Unfortunately, there are trainers who teach a technique called the alpha rollover. As I mentioned earlier, these trainers still think the dominant animal takes the submissive animal and flips it over on its back. They instruct dog owners to use this technique to show their dog who's the true dominant animal. This method should never be used because it teaches the dog that the strongest animal is always the winner, and you should never use force. When the 30-pound dog turns into a 90 or 100-pound dog, some owners with certain dogs can put themselves at great risk. Dogs learn that physical force is the way to achieve higher status with their human family, which can potentially put children and seniors at risk. If your trainer suggests using this technique, I recommend you stand up, ask for a refund, and find a trainer that uses praise and reward training methods. Better yet, before you attend the class, ask the trainer if they use the alpha rollover method, and if they do, don't even sign up for the class. Thank you for joining today's podcast. Now, let's talk about a few things we can do to help turn our puppies into well-socialized, well-mannered adult dogs. It is extremely important to start training puppies as soon as you acquire them. The socialization window for pups is between 8 and 12 weeks of age. During that time, they need to be exposed to anything they will ever be exposed to in the future. You want them to be able to feel that I've been there, I've done that, I'm not afraid of it. Early obedience training is very important for several reasons. It gets pups accustomed to different environments, different dogs, strangers, and often children. Puppy training classes can be a fun experience for your pup with no heavy-handed training. Your pup should be given lots of attention by everyone in the class so they realize that strangers and children are going to be fun to be around. We have to teach our pups that nothing in life is free and they have to earn everything they want. I always instruct new puppy owners to use lots of tasty food rewards for training, but use those real special rewards just for the training process. During this first veterinary puppy exam, I show them how to make the puppy sit. I tell them that from now on, their pup has to sit for everything that it wants. When you take a puppy to the door to go outside, make it sit. The pup has to sit before it gets any attention. This is how you keep your pup from jumping up on you. They soon learn, unless they're sitting, they don't get any attention or praise. When it's feeding time, make the pup sit before she's allowed to have her food, and then after she's been sitting for a short time, say okay, and let her have the food. One command that owners often give that is incorrect is when their dog is growling at someone and it's nervous, the owner will often say, it's okay, and basically, they're telling their dog it's okay to growl. A better correction would be to say to your dog in a slightly stern voice, no growl, and then if it stops growling, say good dog, because it's getting rewarded for stopping the growling. Keep that in mind the next time your dog growls at someone. As I mentioned earlier, there are some dogs that have neurotransmitter chemicals that are missing in their brain, and many of these dogs with aggression problems can benefit from certain anti-anxiety medications. This is a discussion you should have with your own veterinarian. Most of the time when dogs are acting out, it's because of their anxiety levels. They're not sure what's expected of them. Many owners correct their pets long after they've done something wrong. I always told owners of new puppies on their first visit that punishment after the fact does not work. It just makes their dog more anxious. Here's an example. Suppose you've got a 6-month-old puppy and you think it's pretty well trained, and you leave for work at 7 o'clock in the morning and leave the puppy loose in the house. Well, by 10, the puppy's bored and starts pulling at the threads on the couch. It seems like a lot of fun, so the puppy's pulling, and pretty soon he has all the stuffing removed from every one of the cushions. You can imagine how much fun the puppy had doing that. By noon, the puppy has destroyed most of the couch and decides it's time to take a nap. Well, 5 hours later, the owner comes home and is horrified at what he sees. There's stuffing all over the living room, and the couch is totally destroyed. The pup runs to greet the owner because it's happy to see him and hasn't seen him all day. But what does the owner do? He screams, "What did you do?" The puppy doesn't remember anything about destroying the couch, and he's cowering down because the owner's screaming at him. Puppies can respond the same way if the owner does nothing more than a stern look because it knows that particular look is going to be followed by punishment. Remember, dogs take their cues from other dogs by reading their facial expressions and body language, and they read our facial expression and body language the same way. A frown on your face or a grimacing look is also a threat, so they cower and squat to urinate, telling you, "I'm submitting to you, don't hurt me." So it's highly important to never punish an animal after the fact because that just raises their anxiety level, and when a dog is very anxious, you can't properly train them. Extremely aggressive dogs should only be treated by a board-certified veterinary animal behaviorist if possible. Unfortunately, there are not many veterinary animal behaviorists available. All too often, some trainers will use force or harsh methods, which can include pinch collars and shock collars in their attempt to train some dogs. These methods should rarely be used, and the shock collars never. The dog may respond and submit to the trainer because it's scared to death, but when the owner gets the dog back from the trainer, their dog's probably not going to obey them. A few years ago, I had a client that had 2 female pit bull terriers that were about 3 years old. They were very sweet dogs individually, but they didn't like each other. Both dogs wanted to be the boss, and neither dog would submit or defer to the other, and they got into several very aggressive fights. The owner didn't consult me, but instead took the dogs to a trainer who said he could solve their problem. When the owner went to pick her dogs up 2 months later, one dog had 6 broken teeth, the other had 3 broken teeth, and both dogs looked like skeletons because they lost so much weight. I guarantee you, the trainer beat the hell out of these poor dogs. My recommendation for the owner would have been to place one of the dogs in a home that did not have any other dogs. She brought the dogs in for an exam after she got them back to the trainer because they were in such bad condition. I made sure she kept the dogs separated until we got them back into good health and told her she had to find a home for one of the dogs. Both dogs eventually healed up, and the dog that went to the new home became a great family dog for that family because she was the only dog. Dr. Yen says when attempting to rehabilitate an aggressive dog, first keep yourself safe and avoid every situation that triggers an aggressive episode. If it's a favorite toy, get rid of the toy. If it's over food, the only way the dog should be fed is to put the food bowl in a room with a door. Let the dog in to eat and close the door. When it's finished eating, let it out and pick up the food bowl because that's what triggers the aggression. If your dog growls when you try to move him off the couch, then he should never be allowed on the couch again. Aggressive dogs should never sleep in the bed with the owner, much less the same bedroom. When a dog sleeps in the same bedroom as the owner, you elevate his status in the family, and he's not sure if you're the boss or he's the boss. Remember, the alpha dog has his preferred sleeping spot. Occasionally, a female owner would tell me her husband was a salesman and would be gone all week, and the dog would sleep with her. When the husband returns at the end of the week from the sales trip and would try to get in the bed, the dog would often growl at him because he didn't think the husband was high enough ranking to sleep in the same bed with him and the wife. When you have small children and a puppy, I recommend letting the children feed and play games with a pup because the person that feeds you and plays with you is a very important member of the family. I tell owners that with supervision, have their children take food from a cup and put it into the puppy's bowl one handful at a time and allow the pup to eat it. The pup soon learns that a little hand going towards the food bowl is giving him something to eat and not taking something away. This should only be done with friendly puppies, never with an aggressive puppy, and close adult supervision. Dr. Yen also recommends denying access to furniture or any type of resource that could cause conflict. You need to take control of all resources such as food and toys and use them only as rewards for good behavior. Next, she recommends placing your dog on a leash so he has to follow you everywhere you go, indoors and outdoors, for weeks at a time. Lastly, teach him to say please for everything by sitting. Once he knows how to sit, let him figure out the sit on his own. And don't keep telling him to sit. Just look at him, and eventually he will sit. As soon as he sits, reward him. Dr. Yen puts the dog's food for the entire day in a small fanny pack that was on her belt. The dog that was on the leash had to follow her everywhere she went for the day, and whenever she would stop, she would look at the dog and wait for it to sit without giving any command. This method requires the dog to figure out on its own what it had to do in order to be rewarded. This way, the dog might get 30 or 40 rewards each day for obeying versus 5 or 10 rewards if she did this exercise just a few times a day. From that point on, the dog has to sit for everything. It's much easier to start this earn to learn when your dog is a puppy, making him sit for everything he desires, such as eating, receiving praise, and even going outdoors, versus trying to teach it after the dog develops behavioral problems. I hope this information has been helpful. Very few dogs are being dominant, aggressive, and most dogs behave because they're anxious and confused because their owners are so inconsistent in the way they treat them. They use punishment after the fact, and they give their dogs very confusing signals. Dogs that are very anxious can sometimes be fearful, and if pushed too far, can snap. If you challenge a dog enough, and the dog is cowering and you keep punishing or verbally abusing it, eventually the dog is going to be in a fight or flight situation and you're probably going to get bitten. When you're working with your dog, be a fair, consistent, and kind owner so the dog knows exactly what's expected of it. Neutering aggressive dogs will not stop them from being aggressive. If they get into a situation where they're being aggressive, such as when they get into a fight or when they attack someone, they won't bite quite as aggressively and their intensity is decreased. The 3 things that neutering will help are reducing mounting behavior, hiking their leg to mark territories, and decreasing the desire to run away looking for a female dog, but it really doesn't change the dog's aggressive tendencies much. Thank you for listening to my podcast today on Talking Pets with Dr. Gary Clemens. If you haven't listened to my other podcasts, please do so. Tell your family members and friends who own pets about our Facebook page and my podcast. If you have questions about this podcast or recommendations about future podcasts, please post them on my Facebook page, Talking Pets with Dr. Gary Clemens. I'm not always able to answer your questions, but I thank you very much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me for today's podcast. I will post it on my Facebook page, Talking Pets with Dr. Gary Clemens. If you have questions about this podcast or suggestions about future podcasts, please post them there. So for now, I'm Dr. Gary Clemens. Please consider adopting your next pet from a rescue group or animal shelter. Spay and neuter your pets, and if God's willing, I'll be back soon with another podcast at Talking Pets with Dr. Gary Clemens. And for now, so long, love your pets with all the love they deserve, and have a blessed week.